So we know that the end of Battlefield 5 is coming in June, and in the last week or so, a lot of focus has been put on what DICE is doing next. After the end of support announced for Battlefront 2 earlier this week as well, we now know the studio is almost fully focused on Battlefield 6, launching in 2021. By then, the next generation of consoles, so the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, they will have launched and they will have been on the market for close to a year. And according to EA, the DICE team will be looking to take advantage of those consoles in a big way, as you'd expect. And we're going to talk about what that might mean in this video today. But just before we do, if you are a regular watcher of this channel and you aren't yet subscribed, please do consider clicking the subscribe button. Nearly 20,000 new subscribers have joined the channel in the last 3 weeks or so, and it'd be great if we could keep growing the community here around Battlefield and Warzone. Okay then, let's get into it. It has been clear for a while now that the next Battlefield game was going to launch on the next generation of consoles. Ever since EA first publicly acknowledged that the next title was being worked on, the stance at the same time was that EA as a company was somewhat skipping the 2020 launch of the consoles, and instead they were choosing to launch all of their next generation titles the year after, in 2021. And that's to take advantage not only of the extra power of the consoles, but also the larger install base that those consoles will have by the end of that year. More people will have bought the new consoles and they won't have just come out, meaning that there might be a dip in sales. The last time a console generation came around, EA did decide to try and capitalise on that opportunity by releasing Battlefield 4. First on the last generation consoles about 2 months before, and then again on the next generation consoles. And that resulted in a pretty terrible situation. DICE as a studio had to produce 5 different versions of Battlefield 4, one each for the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, the PC, the Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4. And then on top of that, you had to consider that the next generation consoles had only just launched, meaning the prototype units and the technology that DICE had been using to develop those added versions of Battlefield 4, they were working with brand new stuff, and likely anything they produced wouldn't be as well optimized, or it wouldn't fully take advantage of the power available to them. Plenty of other next generation titles also suffered buggy or broken releases. It's just that Battlefield 4 was perhaps even more broken and messy than others, and because the name Battlefield was attached to it, it was quite popular. Because of the workload required to produce those extra versions on top of the 3 usual ones, the situation wasn't brilliant. That's not going to happen this time though for Battlefield 6. EA have made that decision to skip nearly a whole year on the next generation consoles, and they will launch most of their next gen titles in 2021. The direct quote that we have from EA around the next generation consoles says that Battlefield 6 will be targeting new innovations enabled by PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. So what will these innovations be that DICE is targeting? I think there's quite a few easy conclusions that we can come to here, and I won't go on into speculation because we still don't know a huge amount about the next generation consoles above those really high level points that are being used to market them. So first of all, I think the most obvious one is speed. Both of the next generation consoles have built-in solid-state drives, which will decrease the loading times of different games, and perhaps speed up the call of assets that the game will be using. Solid-state drives have become almost commonplace in PCs for a while now, and really any gaming PC you buy or put together yourself, the boot drive and perhaps even a secondary drive will likely be solid-state, with massively faster read and write times. Both consoles have their own unique systems built in to link the SSD and the processor together in an effort to really bring down loading times and allow more processes to sit in memory so that you can switch between games and applications at a much faster rate. And so relating that to Battlefield 6, you are very likely to see much shorter startup times for the game, reaching into those game menus a little bit faster, and then faster loading elements of pretty much anything left in the game. Loading times on slower mechanical hard drives in the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, they can be really quite painful to sit through compared to the few seconds that it takes on my gaming PC, because it has some really fast solid-state drives in it. So console players here, they will see a massive benefit on the next generation consoles. The speed will be so much faster than what's currently available. Second of all, high refresh rate gaming. Currently, the Xbox One and the PS4, they're able to deliver outputs of up to 4K resolution at 60 frames per second, which is actually really good considering the hardware that's inside those current generation consoles, and it fits the trend in console gaming for the past decade or so, at least with 60 FPS. There are many games that have been running at 60 FPS for quite some time. But on the PC side of things, high refresh rate gaming has been gaining more and more ground in the last few years, with graphical power growing through the generations of graphics cards and processors that are coming out onto the market. There are now PC monitors and even laptops that are equipped with panels that can achieve 300 Hz refresh rates. They are of course expensive, but they are on the market. I'd say the accepted standard for high refresh rate gaming is probably 120Hz to 144Hz. Panels able to refresh that many times a second to display that many frames of the game that you're playing. I currently have two 165Hz monitors on my desk, and they work really, really well for Battlefield 5. I'm able to get those kind of frame rates with the right graphical settings at 1440p. The game does look really awesome, and it's really smooth and responsive. So the next generation consoles will both be pushing for high refresh rate gaming support. Microsoft has already confirmed that the Xbox Series X has a performance target of up to 4K resolution and up to 120 FPS, and of course they've even said that 8K resolution will be supported as well, though that might be going a little bit too far. The jump from 60Hz to 120Hz in that refresh rate category, it's a hugely noticeable one. Even more so than going from 120 to 240 or 300. That jump from 60 to 120, the smoothness difference is insane. And it's definitely going to make gaming on a console feel a lot more fluid, a lot more snappy, and a lot more responsive. When it comes to first-person shooter games, and especially in the current gaming climate, where gamers appear to be preferring faster time to kill, responsiveness is absolutely key. If your next generation console is able to pump out 120 FPS in the next Battlefield game, and your TV or monitor has a 120Hz or higher refresh rate, then you're actually going to be seeing more frames pumped out from your console. This little graphic here shows the difference between different refresh rates quite nicely, and there is quite a big difference between some of them. A higher refresh rate shows more frames on your screen, and that enables you to pick up on more of what's happening in the same time frame. We already know how chaotic and action-packed a round of Battlefield can be, so if you can see all of that action happening and react faster with Battlefield 6 on your next generation console, then you are going to have a better experience than you did in Battlefield 5 on the last generation of consoles. And then another thing, when it comes to high refresh rates, we're going to talk about variable refresh rate, because that has also come a long way in the last few years. Variable refresh rate, or VRR as it's known, is a technology that aims to eliminate all those potential stutters and tearing that games can experience by keeping the refresh rate of the screen in sync with the fluctuating frame rate that your game is running at. So at times, during perhaps more graphically intense moments, when there's more action happening on your screen, that's going to take more processing power, so the amount of frames that your console can output, that will drop down a little bit. More power is needed to process that scene. So during these moments, on the next generation consoles, variable refresh rate is going to scale down the refresh rate of the monitor and then scale it back up afterwards again. And the result is a much smoother experience on your screen, despite that momentary drop in frame rate, and the elimination of screen tearing. That's where your screen is trying to show more than one frame on it at the same time, and it looks a little bit strange. Nvidia first started pushing this technology a few years back, and for PC gaming today you can find any number of monitors that are marked with a G-Sync enabled badge. G-Sync is just the name of their VRR implementation, and the standard is being rolled out even to screens not marked with that name, but are still capable of achieving the same outcome. With that kind of technology coming to the next generation of consoles, you should expect a much smoother experience to come from Battlefield 6. And as I mentioned before, we know how crazy and graphically demanding Battlefield games can get, so technology to help smooth all of that out and keep things nice and responsive is definitely a good thing. And then lastly, let's talk about graphical fidelity. With each Battlefield game, we do see improvements to the graphics. Battlefield 5 was a step up in the more granular details, and personally I thought DICE went a bit too far in the wrong direction. They made the game look very grainy, and the outcome was that it was actually harder to pick out enemies from the background, but regardless of that, you can say that Battlefield 5 is still a very good looking game, and there is absolutely no doubt that Battlefield 6 will be a very pretty game as well. The last 10 years of Battlefield games on Frostbite have conditioned us to expect Battlefield games to look impressive. But the next-gen consoles, they also are going to be taking advantage of the implementation of ray tracing, and I fully expect DICE to jump on that hype train. This has already been shown with Minecraft running on the Xbox Series X, and it does offer a sizable jump in graphical fidelity, and that's going to be huge for single-player or narrative-driven games. For Battlefield 6, it might show up in the multiplayer as a sort of ultra-graphic option, since DICE was one of the first developers to work with the technology in Battlefield 5, and they did implement it into the multiplayer section of that game, but I'd argue that by supporting ray tracing, what that really tells me is that the consoles will just be a lot more powerful than the previous generation, and so all of that power can be put into making Battlefield 6 look as awesome as possible. So whilst EA's statement was very general around the next generation of consoles, I think it's fairly obvious how the team is planning to use the power of those new units to make Battlefield 6 better. There's certain things that we can already tell from the next generation of consoles that will be used in multiple titles that get released for it. I think the key points for me are the faster loading times and the high refresh rate support. Those are going to be absolute game changers for console players. They've been stuck at 60 Hz for the longest time, 60 FPS. Once they're able to break that 60 FPS barrier, if Battlefield 6 can run at 1080p and 120 frames per second on the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, you console players, you're going to absolutely love that. You're going to be able to experience something that PC players have been experiencing for quite some time now, and the experience will be a lot closer between all different versions of the game. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. I'm interested to hear what you think, and leave me a rating as well. It is greatly appreciated. And I'll catch you all in the next one.